I'm here today with Joel Shaw, lead pastor of the Tivoli Miracle Centre. Joel, welcome, and thanks for coming along and giving time for this conversation, this chat that we're going to have. You're doing some pretty special things apart from leading a local church. I understand that you've been engaged in raising up disciple-making groups and planting churches. Would you care to just give a bit of a summary as to what you're doing there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Tim. Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. I won't give you the too much of the backstory, but so yeah, I lead a local church out here in Ipswich in Queensland, and in fact, Tim, we actually own a drive-in cinema, which is a quite a unique situation for outreach and different things like that. But really was captivated. We were mentioning before about when I read the book T for T, Trainer for Trainer. And that really sparked something in my heart in terms of being able to see discipleship multiplication, to be able to see churches planting churches. And we started to put some of these things in practice. In fact, I was running a school at the time, School of Supernatural Transformation. And I really was wanting to break the, just to see how we can disciple these. We were seeing a lot of people come to Christ, but we wanted to disciple these new ones well. And we had 3 Chinese girls that gave their heart to the Lord on a Friday. And so we took some of the original T for T stuff and we began to train them immediately. I think it was on the Tuesday in some of the, how to share the gospel with their friends, their new identity as new believers. And they began to write down a list of names of people that were far from God. They listed 27 names of people that they were, attending. This is in the Kelvin Grove University. And so they said, we're about to go to a class. Can we start sharing immediately? And they said, yeah, go for it. So these girls just started sharing with all of their friends. It was amazing. So within 1 week, that was the 2 girls had led, Barbara and Bella had led 3 others to the Lord. But not only had they led them to the Lord, and this is the first time that I've seen this before, because we trained Barbara and Bella when they led people to the Lord, what they were going to do next. These 3 ones went out and actually led 2 others to the Lord. So within a 7-day period, it had already gone, a generation or a couple generations. So I was like, man, this is amazing. So I started reaching out for coaching. I got connected to a guy named Zach, who has seen real multiplication. He works for YFC and also No Place Left in Tonga. There's a massive multiplication over there. And he introduced me to some simple tools like the 3 circles and the 411. And so we just started training like crazy. And I was amazed because I've been running evangelism equipping sessions for a long time. And we noticed that when we put these practical evangelism tools in people's hands, that they just begin to share like crazy. And so that I think I was amazed within a couple months, we had about 300 decisions for Christ in Australia from one of the trainings. And so that's kind of been a little snapshot of my journey at the moment. I'm being coached by a couple movement catalysts in the US, Troy Cooper and Rick Prioto. Troy Cooper trained a guy named Jacob Vai in Haiti, and he wasn't seeing any new disciples being made or people coming to Christ. But after implementing some of these simple biblical tools, they're now seeing over 1,000 baptisms per day. And so impressed by this story. And so it's been really exciting just to be connected with him. So that's kind of really launched me into this journey of disciple making and discipleship multiplication.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. Can you just give us some thoughts in relation to the difference between evangelism, which I guess has been the traditional focus in Western countries like Australia, and disciple making, which obviously T4T spoke about, and we're seeing really make big inroads into our country.
Yeah, so that was a huge transition for me. I'm Tim. I think I don't mentioned if you certainly don't seem like an introvert. Was that your INTP?
So I'm an introvert.
I'm a real introvert at heart, and I remember my mother saying when I was a kid, saying that Joel is painfully shy. So I had written off the whole concept of evangelism completely because my brother is a massive extrovert, very gifted socially, could connect with people that were far from God very easily. And so I was just, very quiet, fearful to be able to approach people. And, and I was a worship leader. So I'd kind of excluded myself from that evangelistic ministry. But after we ran a prayer meeting that lasted about a year and a half, the Lord really ejected me into the harvest, and I just started to burn for souls. And so I think it was the very first girl that we prayed for out on the street was actually completely deaf in both of her ears. She was 14 years old, and God opened her ears, and I was just absolutely amazed. And so so we started having people from all over asking us to train them. So we started on Thursday nights. We were doing mall evangelism, and we were just seeing people come to Christ every single week. And then we started in 16 different locations over Southeast Queensland. It was just amazing the amount of people that were making decisions for Christ. But the biggest frustration in this period is I'm like, all of these people are having genuine encounters with the Lord. They're getting healed. Like we saw blind eyes open, we saw deaf ears open, we saw, there was a guy that had a bone that was fused incorrectly, and when we prayed for him, it just straightened up. Like, I was freaking out when we were seeing things like that. But yet the distance between, we had contact cards, we tried to follow them up, and the difficulty is we just couldn't. It was very hard to make the transition between those that were out on the streets making decisions for Christ to actually bringing them to church. And so this has really been the transition for me from evangelism into discipleship. And I was thinking, Tim, about Luke 10, and where Jesus sends out the 70, and he sends them out 2 by 2. He says, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers. It says, heal the sick, tell them that the kingdom of God is near. And so I feel like we were doing all of those things.
Yeah.
But the next part, I feel like we really neglected. And where I reread this, and I see where Jesus says, not only does he send them out 2 by 2 to pray, to declare the kingdom, to heal the sick, but it says when you go to a house of peace, or you find a son of peace there, remain in that house and don't go house to house.
Yeah.
And so that was a significant shift for me, because I feel like that there was, in that period of evangelism, I didn't have time to actually slow down enough to invest in the key persons of peace, because I felt like I needed to pull in the entire net. But I feel like now where we are is shifting from not just sowing seeds, but actually looking, are there fourth soil people that are going to produce 30, 60, and 100-fold? And, Tim, when we went to the Philippines, we started talking about this whole concept around the person of peace. There was a young pastor named Juliver, and he's an amazing evangelist, and he'd just be sowing seeds everywhere. But discipleship was a real struggle for him. And after we taught him some of the this vision of an oikos map is one of the things, the tools that we have in the 411. And he's like, he sees this guy in one of the villages connected to the whole, like it was a massive oikos map. So he goes up to this village, he finds a guy named Celso, and he witnesses to him. And not only does Celso make a decision for Christ, but Celso actually gathers the entire village. And there's 100 people that actually made a decision for Christ. But not only did they make decisions for Christ, because he was the key person of influence, he was the person that is actually able to see sustainable revival in there. So I think that for me, I was driven by the numbers of people that were coming to Christ. It's like, we're seeing hundreds per week, but missing the opportunity to be able to slow down and say, this person in front of me is showing the signs of being a person of peace, where they're actually not only receiving the messenger, they're a friendly person, not only receiving the message, but they're also receiving the mission. They're like the Samaritan woman that can go back to the town. They can be like the demoniac to be used, in those areas. So that was
I love that, the message, the messenger, the message, and the mission. And so often we forget about that third part, the mission, don't we? Yes. So are you seeing this kind of fruit in Australia at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember there was a young boy named, he's about 14 years old. We led him, we were doing this, what we call a house of peace search, Luke 10 house of peace search, where you know, Tim, I hated the idea of being able to go door to door, but the Lord really challenged me to actually lay down my pride and said, I don't want, you know, I don't want to look like a salesperson. I don't want to look like a Mormon, a Jehovah's Witness. But the Lord said, would you lay down your pride? And, you know, you see this, the disciples were not only preaching in the synagogues and the temple, but they were preaching house to house. So we started to do this. We found a young guy named Bonani, and we led him to the Lord. We baptized him in the Brisbane River. Then I trained him in the 411 tool. And he came back a week later, and he had led 5 of his friends to the Lord and trained them to do exactly the same thing. We also had another family. There was 2 sisters that were coming up from New South Wales, and they just moved in. And they kind of had they're the only 2 in the family that had a relationship with the Lord, but they were praying for a family to actually to meet them in their home that day. So as we sent out our teams, 2 of our team members knocked on their door the very moment that they were praying for somebody to arrive in their house. So they turned up, they ministered to these 2, Robin and Belinda. I had the opportunity of baptizing Robin, and then we have led consecutively many members, not just them, but many members in their house to the Lord. In fact, I had the opportunity of leading her mother to the Lord as she was on her deathbed. They rung her up, and I had a call with her, and the father, I've been working on the father for a long time. His name, I won't say what his name is, but he's like, he was so close to giving his heart to the Lord. But he calls me up after Maureen gave her heart to the Lord, and he said that she was totally bedridden, but when she made a decision for Christ, she said she put her hands up, which she wasn't able to do before, and then she's pointing to each of her family members, basically saying, "You're next, you're next, you're next." And so we've kind of seen that ripple effect happening in not only individuals but in families.
Wow, that's incredible. So tell us about the Acts Now moment. What is the Acts Now moment?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting season. So as I mentioned before, I've been running full-time schools in person, and we've had people, you know, travel from overseas to come and be a part of it, and it's been absolutely wonderful. So just before COVID hit, we were planning to have another in-person discipleship school, and but then all of those plans went out the window because of COVID. So nobody could travel. We're all in lockdown, and so we kind of had to go back to square one. And we're like, well, I didn't like the idea, to be honest, of training online. I'm like, it's not as personal, you know, people are disengaged and all that sort of stuff. But because of COVID, we had no other options. So we launched a school called the Sending Center in last year, which was wonderful. But we had individuals on Zoom, and you know, we saw some wonderful things that were happening. But I really felt the Lord speak to me to say, when we launch again, we're not going to be focusing on individuals. I believe that a key to sustainability is that people are actually doing it in groups, in homes. So we shifted our attention, saying, okay, we want to actually invest into people that can gather and that can go through, you know, some of these simple tools, and they're going to basically, you know, people that would be like a kingdom family on a mission. And so we were kicking around this idea. I've connected with a guy in Thailand, and also Jason Chin in Switzerland. And Jason's been massive in terms of the way that he's trained 100,000 believers in evangelism. So we didn't know if it was going to work. So we're like, we're going to choose 3 time zones. We chose 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. We chose Germany, 7 p.m., and California. So we got these 3 time zones on a Tuesday night. We'll see if we can do it live. We didn't know if people were going to be able to gather people. We put our first advertisement out there, and I think we got 4 people responding to an info night. So we're like, we don't know if this is going to work or if this is going to be a complete failure. Are we even going to have people show up on some of the time zones? But it's been amazing, Tim. Just the Lord has been breathing on it. And for the first Acts Now moment, it's a 12-week intensive. we have every Tuesday night, and then once a month on a Saturday, where we're actually meeting over Zoom for 8 hours. And so it's just immersing in the heart of the Father. We send people out in the streets to share the gospel. And so we had 500 students in the first intake, and 22 nations, which just we were stunned by the results. And I think at the end of it, we had about so there was 73 groups that were gathered, 500 students, 22 nations, and 1,134 recorded decisions for Christ in that first one. But it's continuing to build, and just some wonderful things that the Lord has been doing. For instance, like a young girl named Kelsey in Canada has now launched 4 brand new discipleship groups with new Christians, and actually now they're up to 6, so they're continuing to multiply. And so we're right now we're in the second round. God is doing some amazing things in the Philippines. We're seeing 5th generation churches beginning to multiply. So it's been wonderful.
That's absolutely incredible. Is there any opportunity for people in Australia to enroll in your school at the moment?
Yeah, so we're going to be we are partway through. So we're going to be launching again in January. We're going to be we got some really, really exciting things that are going to happen through that. All the information is on actsnowglobal.com if people want to have a look at that. We have an amazing group up in Gympie. They have about 12 to 20 that are gathered, and just seeing just miracles, salvations, multiplication. We have some amazing things that are happening in Australia.
So out of this, are you finding that you're planting churches or small groups, or what's actually happening?
Yeah, absolutely. So we give people the choice. There are people that are, I guess, part of existing churches, and they are taking the tools. So we've operated out of the 4 fields framework, where we see Jesus entering new fields, sharing the gospel, making disciples, planting churches, and raising leaders to do the same. So we offer tools for entry, where people can share their testimony, heal the sick, how they connect with people that are far from God, how to share the gospel in ways like the 3 circles. Then we have some discipleship tools in there, but also we have some, some church planting tools in there as well. So at the end of it, we have a mixture of groups. There are some people that are saying, yes, we're calling ourselves church, and we're going to multiply churches. And then there's others that are just saying, we're already connected to a church, but we're not going to call ourselves a church. We're going to call ourselves, and we're going to pursue multiplication through discipleship.
Yeah, that's great. Are you finding that your training sits well alongside or within a church, or is it better outside of a church, an existing church?
That's a good question. I think that it works. I think it works in both contexts.
Yeah.
Like as you mentioned, I run we have a building. In fact, we've got a building project for a 1,500 seat auditorium, so the discipleship tools really work, but also I'm so passionate about multiplication and it not coming to the point where we don't have to have our logos on it. We don't have to have our stamp on it. That we want to see multiplication to 4th generation and beyond. So that's what we're encouraging people all over the world, that there are individuals that are working with existing church structures, and that's been a great discipleship follow-up tool. But also people that are saying, hey, there's places as well, like within the prisons, like God's doing massive things in the prisons that I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And these ones can't attend our buildings, but yeah.
So here's a question from left field for you. So you might have to think about this. I don't know, but how have you found that your emergence into disciple making has changed your preaching in your church?
That's a really good question. I feel like the major shift for me in terms of the preaching, I've been thinking a lot about Ephesians chapter 4, where the 5-fold ministry is for the equipping of the saints to do the work of the ministry. And I feel like in the past, I've really operated under the concept that, subtly, I guess, that the fivefold ministry as a pastor, as a preacher, that I'm meant to be doing the majority of the ministry, to be really honest. But I think we are shifting as a church, we are shifting much stronger towards, this is body ministry. This is not a single superstar. And it is, rather than seeing myself as, one illustration we talk about is oftentimes it can be like, the coach, if you got the Brisbane Broncos, if you got the coach in the locker room and he's hyping them up, come on guys, we're ready to go. And then after they've got the locker room, then everyone goes home and they expect the coach to do all the work. It's like, that would be insane if that were the case. So I want to see myself more as a coach. And I think that with my preaching in the past, to be, totally transparent, I think oftentimes as a preacher, I've felt a pressure that I actually need to do things that other people can't do.
Yes.
To have credibility. So people come to watch some kind of a performance, and I got to demonstrate something that nobody else can do. But now I feel like, as I'm shifting more into an equipper zone, I actually need to be able to be operating in a place where I can bring others in. And it's not about me doing things that other people can't do, but being able to empower more people. So
really, your journey down the disciple making has probably seen a fundamental shift taking place in how you actually lead your own church.
100%, yeah.
Would you go back to the old way?
No, never. For instance, Tim, just on Sunday, we would have had maybe 9 people that were participating up the front. We had 5 prophetic voices that released a specific word. We had, so that there's more of this body ministry that's happening. And I think I'm trying to move it away from, hey, we're coming here to listen to Pastor Joel, but we're actually a company of people that are shifting from consumers to ministers of the gospel.
Yeah, no, that's great. Joel, we'll wrap up in a moment, but just one final question for you is your vision. Tell us about the vision that you actually have.
Yeah, well, Tim, I remember having a vision a couple of years ago. And it just deeply impacted me. And I saw 1 million people around the throne. It was like different tribes and nations and tongues, and I began to just weep. And so that's one of the things that I often envision, like 1 million disciples. But we also had a prophetic word from a guy named Jason Ma, who sits on the American Prophetic Council, and he's personally seen 300 movements on college campuses. And he prophesied 10,000 multiplications, and then those would continue to multiply in 5 years. So that's been a real big one that we're believing for. Is not just, I mean, we've got maybe about 72 groups at the moment, so it's a massive stretch from that. But to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly far greater than we can ask or imagine. So we're believing for that. And Tim, I know that you've just challenged me before to really to set some benchmarks and things like that. And so that's something we're going to be really processing as a team in the next few years to say, hey, what can we believe for this year? What can we believe that? But yeah, that's the big vision.
No, that's fantastic. That's so exciting. And Joel, I'm just going to so much look forward to keeping track of your progress and the journey that you're on, just over the time to come. I can see how God's got his hand on you, and you're doing incredible things in about 27 different nations now by God's grace, but also can see how I believe he really wants to use you in terms of seeing churches transitioning into being disciple-making churches here in this country as well. So Joel, thank you very much for your time today and your wisdom, and I look forward to seeing how you position, how you track from here, but also it's exciting to hear that you're running the school again from January. And actsnowglobal.com, that's the website for people to look up.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim. Brilliant.